Hello, good morning, colleagues. So, a little background. First, I'm Leandro S. This is my first time to present a paper here in AUSN. I am a teacher of economics, as well as doing some statistics back in the Philippines. And my paper will be dealing with some descriptive and differential statistics about economic growth and environmental management in our country. So, as an economist, there have been lots of interests, especially in the Philippines, how we try to manage our environment as well as to maintain and sustain our economic growth. And that triggers me to study these two variables and try to give everyone a hint on what, where, and what is the Philippines doing now in order for us to still take good care of our environment while ensuring that we will be growing as a nation. So this is the summary of my presentation. I'll be doing some introduction first and then the background of the study. And then I'll be giving you two objectives of my study. Some literatures will be mentioned and my methodology. Then we're going to proceed with my results. And from there, I'm going to give some policies. So, economic growth is one of the fundamentals of every country's well-being. It's one of the macroeconomic goals that every nation must face. And according to one of the famous economists, Gregory Mankiw, he mentioned that for the standard of living of a nation, or every people in that nation, to grow, then economic growth must be present first. Thus, it's one of the problems that we, the Philippines, as well as the administration in the Philippines, are trying to address these past few years. Different nations, different countries formulated different approaches in achieving economic growth. Every country is in a race to formulate different policies in order to experience this growth. Some countries failed, some succeeded. But in the process of doing these policies, we're hoping that in the long run, it will have a positive effect with the Filipinos. Another variable that interests me to study is the environment. There have been lots of studies here for the past 2 days that I've been here and listening to all of you about environment. So I hope this numerical study about the environment would interest you as well. So environment is also another factor that should be not to be taken for granted by the government. Different nations nowadays tries to mix and match different economic growth policies that in some ways would also help take good care of the economy. So in summary, the paper will be dealing with environment versus growth. Okay. There have been also lots of theories that claim in order for, if a nation is experiencing some growth, most of the time, it is at the expense of the environment. But later, you would see that based on the historical data of the Philippines, it is not always correct using the 2-decade data of our country. So as we all know, Philippines is an archipelago. We were endowed with lots of natural resources. We are known to be an agricultural dependent economy for the past decades, but slowly we're trying to convert the economy from an agricultural sector into a more industrialized sector. Although for these past years, we were known to be, our growth is primarily driven or fueled by the service sector. If you happen to visit the Philippines, and if you happen to read some news about the Philippines, Philippines is one of the countries in Asia, if not in the whole world, where an industry called call center industry is very well known of. growth in the Philippines had been increasing since 1980s. We're once to be known as one of the countries with highest economic growth. We have an annual sustained growth of 6 to 7% from 2010 to 2017, and we are still expecting to grow by another 6% next year, if not up to 7%, according to our National Economic Development Authority, or NEDA. There is a comparison between different nations' economic growth, or GDP growth, with our neighboring countries here in Asia. Although we know the growth experienced by China is very big compared to the Philippines. So as I was saying a while ago, the economy of the Philippines is driven by the service sector. Though, if you would look here, the growth of the economy in the industry sector is better than the service. But still, we are still claiming that we are an agricultural nation. It's quite ironic that our colleagues from Mindanao were not here, because there is this BuildBuild Project by our president right now, which is a very well-known president, President Duterte, a very controversial president. So our President Duterte promised that there will be a continuous growth to be experienced by the economy for the next 3 to 5 years. He crafted what he called Dutertenomics, which will be the key for the Philippine economy to experience beyond the expected growth in the economy. So one of which is we call BuildBuild Project. So it's a project where President Duterte tries to connect the different islands of the nation by creating bridges and improving transportation means from the provinces to the center of the Philippines, which is Manila. BuildBuild Project, according to UN, is a very, how do you say this? It's the fund that President Duterte allotted for this project is 180 billion US dollars, which is a very tremendous amount for an economy like the Philippines. Next is the environmental performance of the Philippines. I happened to browse the performance of every nation for the past 2 decades when I visited the site of Yale University. They have these metrics where they're trying to measure how an economy or how a country performs in terms of managing their environmental care. They call it EPI, or the Environmental Performance Index of every nation. So EPI by Yale University tries to measure how an economy or how a nation tries to care or take good care of their environment using these 10 parameters or using these 10 criteria. So as you will notice, by the way, this is the latest data from EPI of the Philippines. The ranks of the Philippines in terms of environmental health out of 180 nations is 112. So we got a low ranks in terms of environmental health, whereas in ecosystem vitality, we are almost at the 25% or 1/4 of the countries included on the survey. The data here represents the scores given by Yale University to each nation, wherein if you got 100 score, that means you really take good care of the environment. So if you would notice, one of the lowest scores that the economy or the country got is in forests, taking good care of our forests. It is also noted here in the presentation that we scored one of the highest in terms of our fisheries, where we ranked 19th. By the way, this is the EPI is a collaboration of Yale University and Columbia University. So, given these variables, I decided why not study and try to correlate, try to determine if there's a relationship, prove the relationship between economic growth and the environmental management of the Philippines, and further try to prove if the EKC or the environmental Kuznets curve is applicable in the Philippines. EKC, or the ones formulated by Simon Smith Kuznets, very well-known economists, hypothesized that there is this relationship between economic growth and environmental degradation. He claimed that as a nation grows, there will be some point in time where the environmental degradation will be experienced. But as we further grow as an economy, there will be a decline or there will be an improvement in the environmental care. It's an inverted U-shaped graph illustration. So again, my study focuses on the real GDP and its relationship with the EPI or vice versa. I assume that I uses real GDP as a proxy variable for the growth of an economy and environmental care using EPI. I consider these literatures that has a close relationship with the paper that I made. So I have here the papers or the literatures made by Dixon, Corvalan, and Constantini and Boni, wherein they claimed, Dixon claimed that the growth of an economy is mainly attributed to the employment and consumption of its renewable resources. According to Constantine and Boni, they found out that it's the human development that causes sustainable economic development, while Corvalan claimed that health is one of the effects or will be the ones to suffer if we try to tweak some policies about the environment. There are also lots of studies about the EKC. So we have the study of Barrett and Grady. They claim that pollution worsened first, then later improves as the income of an economy increases. According to Benemo, using the data from China, when they entered the World Trade Organization in 2001, this agreement triggered an increase in the environmental degradation in China. And of course, we know China economy had been experiencing tremendous growth for the past years. There is also a study already made by Amir using the 11 data from these countries, Bangladesh, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, and so forth, about the application of EKC, and he also found out that among these 11 nations, EKC is proven true, but only in the context of SO2 emissions. In order to prove or find answers and objectives I mentioned a while ago, I use this methodology. I use linear regression to find if there is a relationship about the real GDP or the growth of an economy with its environmental protection. And of course, there are also lots of other statistics employed here, but this is the main stat that I use for this study. And here is the result of the regression using the 20 latest data about real GDP and EPI of the Philippines. It is proven statistically that there is a relationship between environmental performance index and economic growth. Though the relationship is moderately, right, it is found out that as an economy grow, we are expecting that EPI, or our protection for the environment, will also grow. So how much is the effect of an economic growth to our EPI? So based on the results, a unit increase in an economic growth would have a 0.00002 increase in our EPI. This simply means that as the economy of the Philippines, if the economy of the Philippines grew by $1 million US, as what our real GDP is being measured, we are expecting that our ranking, or our performance index on our environmental care, will increase by 2 points. The latest ranking of the Philippines overall is somewhere between 60 to 70. Thus, if the government wanted to increase that number, then we should really work hard to increase the worth of the economy in the future so as to have an improvement on our EPI, or the index. The result of the research is similar with these two papers created by Barrett and Grady and Barbier, wherein they found out that EKC is really applicable, or the environmental degradation happens. Oops, sorry. So the result of the research is congruent with the study of Barrett and Grady. These two researchers claim that degradation happens first when an economy experiences economic growth, but then rebounds as the economy progresses. This phenomenon happens because people who are experiencing economic growth, or a nation who is experiencing economic growth, would lead people to demand improvements in the environmental quality, which is one of the factors how our standard of living increases. This is the EPI graphical representation for the past 2 decades. It almost reflects the EKC, or the environmental goodness curve. Though it is expected that on the next 2 decades, the EPI of the Philippines will again increase, and again will follow the goodness curve. Given these findings, the research found out that environmental growth really affects the environmental performance index of the country, and EKC is really applicable using the data of the Philippines. These are the conclusions and recommendations, or policy implications. Table represents the allotment of budget of the Philippine government with respect to the different offices that tries to solve some problems in the country. If you would notice, DENR, which is the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, received 24 billion pesos from the government. An increase of 3 billion from 2017 budget. if the government would really wanted to improve the EPI of the country, one of the policies that I'm seeing here is for the government to allot a huge amount of the economy's worth, or GDP, or our budget, to DENR, to ensure that all the programs of DENR will be sustainable and will be pushed through, or they could create another program that could take good care of the environment. Although there is this study by Coxhead and Jayasuriya, wherein they claim that although Philippines is endowed with natural resources and the government is trying to address these kind of problems by giving some budgets with the different offices or arm of the Philippines, corruption is one of the problems that had been seen in the Philippine setting. So what I'm trying to say here, and trying to relate it to one of the policies that I'm recommending, the government can increase the budget allotment for DENR, but they just have to ensure that this budget is really being used, okay, for the development or taking good care of the environment. Okay. We have this phrase in economics called ceteris paribus. So these policies should be followed ceteris paribus. So here is the EPI again of the Philippines. The performance index of the Philippines in terms of taking good care of the environment is at its worst in years 2007 until 2016. According to the literatures I read, the reason, or one of the reasons, or the reasons why the EPI is set at this value, it's because of the rural to urban migration experienced in the nation and the ballooning growth of the population of the country from 2006 to 2016. Whereas the decline in our EPI, or the improvement in our EPI experienced during 2017 onwards, is because of the different programs implemented by DENR. I'll just enumerate some of their programs that have had a big impact on the environment in our country. One of which is coastal hazard management, forest restoration, water quality management, conservation of the biodiversity, and some other pro-environmental programs of DENR. So what are the policies that the government should take into consideration in order to address the following concerns? Going back to the EPI score of the Philippines, one of the problems we are experiencing is the exposure on heavy metals, or the heavy metal industry exposure in our nation. Thus, one of the policies that I'm seeing here, I happen to read that there are lots of policies, Republic Acts already created in the Philippines, but unfortunately, it's the implementation where the government is lacking. According to the talk of one of our colleagues yesterday, there are only few Filipinos who own these kind of industries, the mining industry in the nation. So we could deduce that there really is no equal opportunities provided for the people who wants to engage in that business. And we know that if there are only few people who control such industries, then they will be given so much freedom on whatever they wanted to do in order to gain profit in that industry. Another policy that I'm looking at is the agricultural land development for housing projects. If you happen to read some news in the Philippines these past few years, there is a major development being done in some of the farmlands in the nation in order to support the growing population of the nation. There is this one notable person by the name of Senator Villar, one of the senators in the Philippines, who happens to own the biggest land development companies in the Philippines. And she's very controversial, or their family is very controversial, because they bought large tracts of land among neighboring provinces of the metro and converted these farmlands into a housing project. So again, there is already a Republic Act or a law crafted before, but unfortunately, since she is, or their family is known in the political dynasty of the Philippines, the government lacks this, what do you call this? The law does not apply to these people. They control the political climate in the country. This is already mentioned a while ago. Based on the study, there is this increase in the rural-urban migration in the nation, because Filipinos still believed that urban life is far better than their rural life. So in some ways, this is true. There are lots of companies in the metro who offers large amount of salaries, but this kind of scenario or phenomenon overpopulate the capital and worsens the environmental performance of the country. Therefore, one of the policies that I'm looking at here is for the Philippine government to try to decentralize the economic distribution in the country. And although we're now trying it, the government now tries to create or transfer large companies from the metro to some provinces in order to give opportunities for the people in the provinces to be employed by these big corporations. And again, another concern found out is the overpopulation in the nation. So according to UN, or according to a study made by a Filipino, one of the reasons why depletion in natural resources happen is because of the pressure provided by the population in certain places. Controlling the ballooning number of people could be challenging, especially in the context of the Philippines, where we know is a Catholic nation. The use of contraceptives is still common. So what I'm trying to formulate here is educate people on how to use these kind of contraceptives so that they themselves can decide if they would really want to have large family, or decide not to contribute more or contribute about the overpopulation in the nation. Another policy that I'm seeing here is the Modernization Act of the transportation means in the nation. Although there's already, this act is already put in place, the PUV Modernization Act. If you happen to visit the Philippines, the main transportation means in the nation is called jeepney, right? And these jeepneys is one of the contributors of air pollution in the nation. So, we're hoping that the Philippine government is really serious in the PUV Modernization Act, though there are lots of problems being seen here because as the government tries to improve or implement this PUV Modernization Act, there will be lots of jeepney drivers or people or Filipinos who will be losing their job as jeepney operators since the modern jeepney, as what they call it, would cost them around 1 million pesos, which is way beyond the daily or the budget of an operator for such means of transportation. And I'll cap up the presentation by citing this by Margaret Mead. According to Margaret Mead, we won't have a society if we destroy the environment. Again, thank you. This is the references I used in the study.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Leandro. Would somebody like to make some comments or question? Yes, Ronnie.
Sir. Actually, one of the problems that I see is first policy making and really allocation of our limited resources. You know, Philippines is not a rich country. Our top three the top three departments in the Philippine government that receive much money is the Department of Education, Department of Health, and the military.
Yes.
Agriculture contributes 40% of the Philippine economy, yet in the national budget, agriculture only receives 3%.
Yes.
Government even spends more time on research and works on mining, where mining only contributes 0.2% of our Philippine economy. As you said, the good Senator Villar, who is the chair of the agriculture of the agriculture committee in the Philippine Senate, owns the biggest real estate company in the Philippines. And we also give focus on real estate, which only gives actually 2% of the income in the GDP. Even manufacturing, who is a very disruptive industry, only gives 16% max of our Philippine economy. Basically, Philippines is an agricultural country. Our problem is we don't focus on our strength. Our strength is in agriculture, and we should be funding more agriculture, who only receives 3% of the national budget.
Yeah, I agree on that. Thank you.
Other comments? Yes, John?
And just that curve you mentioned, how for a while as the economy improves, environmental degradation gets worse, and then as the economy gets better, the environment isn't affected quite so much anymore. Now, what does that actually mean? When I look at the Australian example, we've done awful things to our environment. A lot more people are aware of the environment now, and we do look after it more than we used to. But all we're really doing is maintaining it at that fairly bad state. It's not getting worse in the way that it was, but it's probably not getting better either. So does that curve mean that as you get a better economy, the environment actually gets better, or that you just stop ruining it as fast as you were before?
Okay. According to EKC, as the economy grew, as what was mentioned in the first phase, there will be degradation, but as the economy continued to grow, there will be an improvement in the economy, in the environment of the country. So one of which is in the Philippines, we are now trying to, there are lots of policies now or programs now wherein we're trying to replenish, right? We're trying to protect now by planting more trees in some parts of the nation. Thus, in effect, the economy will improve as the economy grows.
Other comments? Yeah. Alex? Yeah.
I like the graph you showed, which showed the increase up until about 2010, and then in the EPI,
Yep.
and then the decrease. How about the GDP? I didn't quite. I could see that it improved, it decreased, and then improved. The EPI.
The EPI, yep.
in the 21st century. But how about the GDP in that period?
The GDP of the Philippines is increasing at a stable rate from 6% to 7% all throughout the two past 2 decades.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much.